All right, well, thanks everybody for attending. We wanted to take an opportunity to show a little bit about space programming and what you could do with it. And from the Imaginate side, we've developed a new module that works with our Imaginate Clarity product to help with that. But much more interesting than that, I think, will be the what Bill has to say about how DLR Group is actually using it and how they're actually looking at space programming going forward. So I'm going to just do a short overview of sort of what is the product, but then the bulk of the hour will be left for Bill to talk about things in the real world. So let's see, moving forward, just a little bit of background if you're unfamiliar with Clarity. Clarity is a on-premise enterprise product that helps with a lot of different areas. Its focal point is automation, automation of repetitive manual tasks within AEC projects, mostly around Revit, a little bit within AutoCAD, and then also just synchronization and other sorts of general sorts of tasks that need to go on week in and week out on any given project. But along with that, we also do a lot of other aspects about what kind of data can we extract for model health purposes, for room and equipment data sheet purposes, for business intelligence purposes. These are all sort of other areas of Clarity, and we've recently gotten into the space programming arena and brought that section within Clarity as well. Now, space programming is something that we've wanted to do for a long time. We've had, if I go back a slide, we've had this room data sheet and equipment data sheet sort of concept for quite some time, but people would ask, can you help us with the planning stage? And we said, no, we really don't do planning. These room and equipment data sheet side of things was really from the Revit portion backwards or forwards in time or to the end. So we've wanted to get into planning, but we really wanted to make sure that we found the right fit for where should we be looking in the within the sort of solution space. What should we try to take on? What should we stay away from? And we eventually sort of got approached by 3 of our existing Clarity customers who actually banded together and really wanted us to provide some space programming features within the platform. And these 3 firms, the third of which I am not allowed to name drop, funded an initial development of this product. In discussing with these 3 firms as well as others, the great majority of the people out there doing space programming were really working in Excel, throwing things over the wall to, I said Revit designers, but in a lot of cases, the early schematic sort of work is sometimes SketchUp, sometimes Revit, sometimes AutoCAD or other. But then, obviously, most of us are working in Revit for the detail side of things. And then, we've got people in project management sort of roles that are responsible for checking over things and making sure that the program comes in reasonably close to the actual. And when we looked around, we saw a variety of different areas within the solution, everything from sort of enterprise level systems that were sort of big and complicated and expensive, to people doing things by hand, to people doing things sort of with do-it-yourself Excel and Dynamo kinds of tools. There's some really interesting stuff going on in sort of hyper automated machine learning, optimization kinds of systems. But it seemed like that was a big jump for people when not everybody has sort of a good repetitive sort of workflow. And so we wondered, is there space in the middle here for Clarity space programming, and something ultimately where there's a straightforward, easy to understand workflow that's still flexible enough to meet people's needs, something that uses Revit for both the conceptual layout as well as the detailed layout, and really at all steps along the process really leverages the data that you have, to give you some good information about the data, but also as you move on to further projects can leverage that, that data about space programming. So that's where we started, and we developed Clarity Space Programming as a tool where you could really continue to use Excel if you want to define your program, because people don't give up Excel very easily. But we wanted to make a nice environment for bringing Excel data into Clarity, provide some value-added tools like stacking charts and pivot tables and reports, give you a nice Revit-oriented process where you could very easily lay out sort of conceptual families in the Revit environment based on your program, sort of constantly be checking Revit against the program, and ultimately help you with that process of moving between conceptual design and later detailed design, even to the point of tracking interiors and FF&E kind of things. And then from the data perspective, we wanted to integrate with the Clarity room and equipment data sheets. We wanted to provide some good reporting kind of capabilities for business intelligence. And the biggest thing that the three firms asked for and said that they had pain with is really tracking how the design changed over time, both in the program stage and in the actual stage. And so that's something that we invested some time in to try to make sure that you could look back over the life of the project, and when the customer comes to you and says, well, when did this change, that you could track that down to a very very obvious time within the data. So yeah, Clarity Space Programming is tracking a wide variety of types of information, sort of shown here. We can bring that data in different ways, directly from Excel. We did build a web interface that we hope is useful for creating or updating your program in the Clarity web interface. And then we also have a pretty fully defined API, so that if you wanted to bulk load things in and you have another application to push things from, or some software developers, you've got that option. We've got options to pull in both sort of structured data for those of you who are into sort of very strictly defined room types versus sort of flat data where everything's all just in one spreadsheet. Here it all is, and figure it all out. And we definitely knew that there's lots of different data that people would like to track and associate it with the program. And so we did build the capability for you to define as much sort of expansion to the data model as you'd like. So yeah, that's possible to fully extend the data model to match what you'd like to track in your program. Once the data gets into Clarity, we try to provide some different tools for looking at it, for viewing it in different ways. We try to provide some tools inside of Revit to make it easy to set up and map. Okay, how do I match all these things that I care about in the program to to my Revit space families or my Revit rooms? So that's a process that's a one-time setup. Can I make it easier to drop my blocks out onto the surface so I can start arranging them to fit the space, and being able to check. Do I have I pushed and pulled to a point where I should worry about the fact that particular rooms don't match the program, or if we have adjacency rules, am I in line with what kind of expectations have been set there? And even tracking it again down to the level of FF&E, if you're interested in tracking that. Do I have all of the pieces that I expect to be within each room? And help me place them if I don't have them. Tracking the data all the way through the process from before, just at the program level, and getting down into actuals, so that non-Revit users can have visibility of where you are at all times, as well as that historical data where where you can go back and look at the history of how things changed over the life of the project. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. I just wanted to sort of give a quick overview, but again, Clarity, it's an on-premise enterprise web application, but we have an additional module here for Clarity Space Programming that gives you access to the these extra capabilities around space programming. So with that, I am going to bow out, and if Ashley, you can promote Bill to be the presenter.
The one thing in there, Matt, that we talked about the tracking of historical data being like the big pain point. They're all big pain points for us. That's the easy one that I can point to tell the story of ROI. So it's like really important for me with that because it's the logical story that I can tell anybody, that I can say every time that we have to review this, every designer says it takes them about a day. So I can look at the number of phases, I can say a day. So I've been saying that, it's going to save you like 40 hours of time on a project as a low end, but because it's hard to quantify the other stuff of like, oh, I laid out a room differently or faster and it tracked it for me. And if somebody's efficient and does it great, it helps them and it helps a lot, but I don't know what kind of hours, and I can't tell an actual story for it. So that's like the really easy way for me to just talk about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in the weeds. We've been in this tool on the version that it is now for a couple months. And so we have used it differently on every project. I had hoped to come and just show like, oh, upload start to finish, here's what our projects look like. But we've done it differently on every single project. And so I'm going to focus more on like the how to get over the hump in certain areas. If somebody does just want to see how to use it, we can do that too during Q&A or whatever we need to do. So I'm going to tell a little story, a little bit different of Matt's of how this happened, and it's more of like my story into how we ended up partnering with Imagine It to help push this forward, and then some stuff that Matt didn't cover, some workarounds, workflow things, and then where we're going next with this. So I just call that the beyond. This is part of a super complicated diagram that I had to put together to explain what I needed to do. So my role at DLR Group, I'm the design technology leader, but I have a dual role in that I'm also a leadership voice in our R&D studio. So when I started, 2.5 years ago, I came and we had a bunch of lists in our business items of things that we were going to do as projects through R&D. And there was one with our higher education group. Their campus planning team wanted to create a tool to look at the urban scale of site. Our justice and civic team had a tool that wanted to go far more granular and track everything inside of rooms. And then our K-12 team wanted to have a way of calculating the number and types of rooms required for a building. So all of those things are happening. Then we also had a project to make our data warehouse to support like evidence-based design, all of our project statistics, accounting, and everything. So I put this together as a presentation to talk about like how these things work together. And then it led to this even more complicated diagram. And this is kind of, the output of that presentation of like these things work together. That's this bigger workflow. We have calculators, and then we have this common thing that we need. We have data sheets, we have modeling, we have project requirements of FF&E and rooms that need to be stored from these calculators. And so with that, I had scoped out, a budget to build a tool that does all of this stuff, which is a lot. So I had this big R&D problem to have to solve. And Matt and I have had a relationship through me with Clarity, and then also at my previous firm, BSA Life Structures, I was a Clarity user there. So Matt and I have talked for a while now, and he had pushed Jake Richard, our sales rep, towards me. And so talking to him, I kind of went off on how Clarity does basically everything in that diagram I just showed, except for the space programming portion. So he set up a call with Matt and I to talk. Matt brought up, hey, there's other people. Do you know this one person? And I happen to, and we think very similar. And we all kind of said, yeah, this is exactly what we want. Can we do it together? And we found this great partnership with us and Matt and Imagine It to actually develop something. So to me, it was awesome. It's one of the things that I sing the praises of the Clarity team, in that they do just take the calls, they listen. It has evolved over years just through our input. So don't be bashful and actually talk to them, because to me, it's what made this successful. In talking about how DLR Group uses this tool, I think it's important for me to talk about, DLR Group as a whole. So we're big, 1,200 plus employees. We have, global locations. We have, we're globally located primarily in the United States, though, and we're spread all over the United States. We have a lot of different services. We're multidisciplined, and then we have a ton of different sectors. And the sectors, they all work differently. And, I already listed a couple that had wanted this tool. So we had K-12, we had Justice and Civic, and our higher education, and healthcare is a very natural fit for this sort of workflow. So we already have these in play that we're going to do it, or already working similar in collect room information, data sheets, validate space programs. We have found that in Workplace, and we've used this in Workplace already. And then the big surprise one to me was our Culture and Performing Arts team. So we're working with them this year to basically calculate out like seats and volumes and people that would fit inside of a theater, and then everything back of house. I'm seeing a question in there. Oh, no, Matt answered it. So, we found a good fit within our firm of how we're going to be able to use this. Looking at the space programming tool, here's a couple of things I'm going to hit into. So the space programming portion, data sheets, reports, tasks, and then some of the server portions. So on the program requirements, this is what it looks like when you're inside of Clarity. You can click and edit this information. We're exploring where is the best place to edit the information. And a couple of these tools, this is a tip that we've learned in trying to kind of master what's going on in here. If we upload a list from Excel of room requirements, it's going to append that list onto the space program. If I add the requirement ID and map that here, then it will update and overwrite the information. So that's how you can take it from Excel and actually edit the information outside of Clarity, and then overwrite or modify, update, whatever you want to call it. And then there's another thing within Revit. If you export your list in Revit, so if you make a whole bunch of parameters, they just work in Revit, you get disconnected in some way, you can take that and map that to this external ID, and that will also update the information in here. So you can update information from Clarity, you can update it from Revit, or you can append on new rooms if you need to. So to me, there's flexibility in there. We did use the room data sheets feature before going into the space programming. And it's fantastic. Now you can add in the space programming information. So it puts us in a spot of, we have to figure out, do we want to in Revit? Because before, all of this had to be a room parameter for us to use it. So you can edit it here. The one thing, I'm out of order. So if you are adding the parameters inside of Revit, this is one trick that we've learned. Like, these are a massive list of requirements, and Matt and I have shared Excel files and gotten to see this for a while. And all of these have to be added to the room elements, and it takes forever. And let's see, hang on a sec. I'll go back, but this is my trick for doing this. So in Revit, you can add your parameters, and if you add to the shared parameter, I don't bother naming them because this is really time consuming inside of Revit. I will just add the types of parameters that I need. And so I'll go through real quick and add a couple parameters, and then I just hit new, I type a number, hit OK, new, type number, hit OK, and I do that for the number of columns of information that I actually need to have. Give it a second, I do 10. But you can actually open this file up, and I do it in text just for quick demo with this. And you can change the information here. And if you call Autodesk, they're gonna say don't edit the shared parameter file, but you can change the type of parameter. So I'm changing all those to text. I changed the name. You can change the group. You can change whether it's hidden or not. I do this in Excel, and I basically copy, paste, drag down, change a lot of the information so it goes way faster. And then I do have Dynamo scripts that you can read this file and it will add all the parameters to your project. So you can take what's a multiple hour task that is, ripe for errors on information, and you can do it very quickly. I'll just open up and show you inside of here. You can see all the names changed. You can see the properties changed. So super cool. It does save us a lot of time. And then Dynamo, you can read the file and add all your parameters. And these, I found out how to do this from the Dynamo forum. So if you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to share. Going back in here, we add all these parameters. You have to figure out whether or not you want them inside of the Clarity database, inside of Revit, or both. There's a lot of mapping that you have to do. If you do edit it inside of the space or inside of the data sheet itself, I highly recommend taking the time and going into the settings and changing some of these groups. So you can add in group headers and it makes this actually usable. Ideally, I would just ask everybody to ask Matt to have it that we can figure out how to edit it in the room data sheet, and then be able to go here to edit it when you want to go into like a bulk mode of doing it in a grid style in Excel if you need to do a lot of the similar changes. What we are doing is working inside of Excel, and this is another kind of tip as far as doing that. It's still long and hard to work through these things. So what we've figured out is that you can add a blank column and name it. So I'm adding a column for sound because these are sound parameters. Use color to help, let people see where things are. But I add finishes, sound, and casework. And then you can group the columns together. And so that lets you actually like hide and expand the columns of information and actually focus where you need to, because it really is a daunting amount of information when you're not editing it right in that, what's really a deliverable in the room data sheet. So here I just select them, you hit group, and then that can expand and contract, which it does make this actually usable. And then you just don't map that text column for finishes, but you map all the other columns to your space programming custom parameters. So you skip that. We also do primarily, I think I'd say, edit inside of Revit. So you can add all those parameters. These are added as rooms. You can checkbox and change. Something that I like to point out is make some extra schedules and have them focused by the type of information you need to, because I can't do that grouping and hide these things and I have to scan through. It takes forever. The other thing to know about is some of these extra columns that I think, they're newer-ish with Revit, but a lot of people don't use them. If you add and use those features like striped helps things, you can freeze your headers. So as you scroll up and down, this information stays at the top, and then use the shading to actually shade the columns, just like in that Excel file, so you can graphically know what you want to look at. All of that does help quite a bit. So for us, we've tried to figure out, do we edit in Clarity, Revit, Excel, and it's become a pick your own poison. So we've just kind of made sure that we know how to do each of them and then work with the teams to figure out what is the best way of doing it for them. The one thing that I do like about Revit versus all the other methods is I can sort and dynamically change that schedule in ways that I can't in Excel, or not as easily in Excel, and I definitely can't do it in Clarity, but I'll sort it all by room name, and then I'll change some of the finishes that just match by room name. I can do some things very quickly that I would do on an individual level in all the other platforms. So the room data sheets, there's some tricks that we found with room images. I love that there's a room image task that will go and make an individual room image, floor plan, and 3D of each room, but it has limitations if you are requiring to have scale for that drawing. So we've had to kind of script it, and then also we've got some requirements with the actual image that I'll show in a second here, but we've found some benefits with the different tasks using custom tasks with Dynamo, and using the Revit image task instead of the room image. But I quickly ran our script to show like what they're wanting is they want to take these two front walls and turn them semi-transparent so that you can see all of the furniture and the layout and have a consistent eye level in how it looks at the room. So because of this, we've got a Dynamo script that will actually do that. And so one thing though is and it makes individual views inside of your file, and then this room image task will export those out. Now we're using the view print set for that. And so there's a challenge in that of, I'm trying to get things as little manual as possible in doing all of this. And unfortunately, that's a big manual thing of if I make all these views and set them to that. So with Dynamo, this is doing a lot, but basically it takes all the rooms that we say we're going to make a room data sheet for. It'll make a floor plan and an isometric view. It'll name them, it'll set a view template, and most of the heavy lifting is done with the view template. I actually use one view template for both and set it to floor plan and 3D view, and it works. Set the crop based on the view. We put an eye level the same for the isometric, and then we basically like take the bounding box and shrink it to the front corner, and whatever walls are hitting into that, we override. So we can override the walls with that script, and then we can set those views inside of the view set, and then we can go and upload these files to BIM 360, or actually to the Clarity site, and then we map them inside of our room data sheet. So it does save us some times. The reports in Clarity, that's always been something of like, I love the reports. You don't really need them with the space program, but there is one thing in the report that I find very useful in working with these. In the workflow, you go to boxes, to rooms, and you manage, or you can go masses, generic models, areas, and rooms. So in the reports, you can do space program, actual space, and you can summarize it by the CAD type. And CAD type, you can see it's saying generic model. Matt, you could probably elaborate on why there'd be a lowercase and an uppercase, but I can quickly see which things are mapped to what type of parameter, and I can use that as a way to manage for like our BIM team to be able to support the projects correctly. On the server level, this was a big thing for us. I mentioned that data warehouse. We are looking at all of our projects across DLR Group. 1,200 employees produces a lot of data when it's in Revit, and Clarity centralizes it really well. So we're trying to get to a point where we can build out the different type codes and things. And we also have standards. We work with healthcare, we work with higher education. So we can map in all of our standards and use those. We can also do that with the FF&E catalog. So we're building out common catalogs of furniture that we use for different either project types, clients, or building types, whatever we need to make it a little bit easier. A little bit of the beyond stuff. This is probably the first kind of thing that we identified that we needed to work with Clarity. So Clarity, you can hit the drop down and pick that list of furniture inside of your room, and it'll push it to the center point. Well, then you go and lay it out, and then this is what Matt Conway, our computational design leader, built, and I'm in love with this. Basically, it's looking at the center of the room, the door, and some windows, and so you can lay it out and then pick the similar rooms, and it's going to smartly copy this information to all those rooms. So you can push one thing with Clarity, manage those requirements, and this gets us out of that argument of superfamily or generic or model group, because every room has a little wrinkle. It could be where these windows need to be, or if there's a bump out, and it catches the rotation and where the door is, and it's not perfect, but I think we can keep going with this. So I'm really excited in where this is going, and we're doing it, wall hosted things and outlets and electrical. So it really does kind of work within this workflow of get your requirements, push them to rooms, and then push that around the building. This is Dan McKenzie, our amazing data scientist. We've been able to do things that I am just amazed with every day, but that initial grid that you saw was some of the data science he's doing to try to normalize rooms. Like here you can see there's dining and food, and then this is probably hard to read, but these have percents after it. We're able to look, because of Clarity, at all of the stuff inside of our rooms. And so what we're trying to do is build out these kits of, hey, this room is this thing. Here's all the stuff that's required in it. Can we push those layouts into the rooms? And this is one of the big requirements for us to have an open API with clarity of, this is a workflow where I don't have a requirement from the client saying you need all of this stuff in the room, or maybe I want to challenge that with, this is in 90% of all DLR Group rooms that are labs or whatever room we're picking, to basically build that intelligence and make suggestions and push things. And when we do that, we want to be able to write that to the Clarity database without really, forcing the designer to change, but we want to make sure that everything gets to Clarity to manage what's changed, to manage how the project's grown or what things were added. So if you've never known that you can get to the API, you can go to the server tab in Clarity, you can go to authentication, and then under the Clarity API keys, there's a link here to REST API. And when you go there, this is the amazing API. And so you can actually do commands from outside of Clarity in other programs, which then just makes Clarity a database. It's not 100% Revit. It doesn't matter. I am in love with what the potential of this is. My goals are to push this to Rhino. We're going to explore SketchUp. I want to see it maybe potentially go into Unreal. I kind of have this vision in my head of being in virtual reality with like floating bubbles that represent spaces, and you can move them around and push them to do your bubble diagrams and then build a building. But this lets us do that. And this, to me, we also have some workflows of like test fitting. So sometimes you just have a boundary and you need to see what's going to fit inside of that boundary. And so we have some tools that we're trying to support that. And if you get that, I'd like to be able to write to Clarity. So we have, for now, just an update Clarity button that you can update the room quantities and information from outside of Revit. Also the furniture types, we can't bulk upload yet. So we've been able to write an add-in to let us bulk upload all of the furniture type requirements by each room. I want to make sure to give time to say thank you to 3 specific people with this. One, Juhui Chia, she's one of our BIM coordinators out of our Chicago office. Juhui has been in the trenches with this project the entire time and has done the bulk of the testing and like the figure it out stuff that we've had to do to get through to this point. So if Juhui, if you're on, thank you. And then Dan McKenzie, I showed some of the work that he's doing. He works tirelessly learning BIM and combing through all the data that we have to make it normalized, because we don't name our stuff the same. We're looking for partners. If there's people that want to share data of building types or work together and find ways to do that, I'm open for that conversation for sure. And then Matt Conway, he's our computational design leader out of our LA office, and he's building the custom tools around this that are kind of making it do more than what it's probably supposed to. While questions are filling in, hopefully, here's just generally inside of Revit what's going on. We have a whole bunch of blocks, and I think Matt repurposed some of these, but just showing some ways that we're actually using it. And each of these blocks is a different Revit family. They have view settings built into them. This one is rectangle locked. So we have a whole bunch of parameters that we've mapped. So, there's the office, there's department. It has the programmed square footage, and then it has the area difference, the actual difference. And this one being locked, it's using math to determine the length and width. So if I stretch it, it gets thinner. And it always stays on 0 for area difference. But if I change this to our rectangle that's not locked, all of a sudden I've got some arrows and I can change that number and I can stretch it, and there you're seeing area difference. So what we can do with that is use schedules or view filters to highlight things that are over a certain % square footage based on a room. And then all the idea is basically the designer can take these shapes, make a space, a bubble diagram to start with, eventually firm it up, lay out the actual layout of the building, and they have the ability to change how they look at different phases. So this is at coarse or medium detail level, so it just looks like boxes, and then we built in a line outside that at fine detail level, it looks like there's a wall there. And then these, there's some math in there of whether it's calculating from the center of this wall or from the finished face of the fake wall. And then with Clarity, you can go to the Clarity add-in. What could go wrong? I haven't connected yet. The idea is with the utility, then you can convert these to rooms. And so you pick which type of thing you're working with. And I can say all the generic models in this view, or I can pre-select before I run it, or I can do all the models at once. And then down here, there's some options. So I can just, create a room and put it there, assuming I've already drawn walls. I can create room separation lines, or I can create walls and pick the wall type I want to use. So I'm just going to grab a random one. And then you can say delete out the box or leave the box, which is pretty cool. And you can say create. And that went through and placed a room, and it placed all those parameter things from Clarity inside of my room. And I have actual walls that are in there. So it really does save a ton. And when we first started this, that wasn't built yet. And the team that was using this was just blown away and excited by just the boxes. And then when we showed them this, it was like their first complaint was, well, we don't want to draw the walls afterwards. And so that got us there really well. And I couldn't praise Matt enough for how this has gone. As far as the spaces themselves, one thing that we've been dealing with is we get a lot of times where there's different buildings and we're working through whether or not we'd use the scenarios or just use portions of the space program. So something that we've done is just say, add a parameter, and I don't have it on this one, but I'll just show what I mean. So I'm gonna pick space programming block, and you can drag and drop these column headers. So I'm pretend department is building, and I could say, oh, we're just gonna work with this building for now, and I can select all of the things from that building, and I can say create, and it'll go and place all of these boxes, which lets them work in a pretty good way of just for that particular. One thing that we found with those boxes is that there's some visibility issues that may pop up in, like, you can see this is one chair or one table and chair block, and there's no chairs showing up. So if you adjust the cut height or the height of some of the boxes maybe, or adjust visibility settings, you can get to both. I've also told teams just run the room tool, put it in, use color fill schemes to do that. I have not gotten into our adjacency yet. That is on my list, and I show this as a sales pitch for anybody hoping to do something or that has a great idea already. But basically, we'll do some diagrams like this, or we'll use some families overlapping, and I'm hoping to script or something the rooms that are hitting there that are touching, or what the adjacency should be, because the adjacency rules inside of the space programming tool, it'll run the basically the exiting tool that's in Revit now to check all of those, whether it's from this door to this door, or center of room to center of room, or adjacent. It'll go through and check those. And so to me, that's next on my list of what I want to work through to see how we can use that. Here's a typical DLR Group room data sheet that we've built thus far. We're using this on, I think, 19 projects, and some of those are being just demoed, but still it's quite a few that we've kicked off with. So I don't think we've reused the same room data sheet and parameters yet, so I hope that we do to gain some efficiency there. But even the time it takes to set all of this up, because each one of these either needs to be made as a space programming requirement or as a room parameter inside of Revit, so it's still work to do all of this. And then, yeah, these are more of those symbols as far as adjacency things. And then there's another look at one of our room inputs. Let's see. And Matt, jump in on any of those if you have a.
Yeah, and I did respond to this one. I mean, I think it was designed to work with design options, but I'm not sure, how extensively it's been used that way. Phasing as well. I mean, like we're big on Like, you can't ignore Revit phasing or Revit design options because, that's the reality. So we do have this scenario concept within the space programming, and it is designed a little bit like the design option concept of the fact that, from a program perspective, there is there's sort of the main model, and then there's design options in the form of these scenarios. But that said, I would say that it's still a little bit still conceptually challenging to fully make it all work, and I will feel better when somebody has a chance to use it on a real world project, and tells us that it did work out. But yeah, the concept of design options or scenarios in this case, there is always, when you do have scenarios, you can see in the upper right corner here, in the web side of things, you're always in a particular active scenario sort of view from a program perspective, and then program elements can either be part of the main model, or it can be assigned to a specific scenario. So that's what we have.
And we did try using it, and it kind of just got into a panic of time, and we ended up just exporting this list out and deleting the requirement ID from the Excel, and then re-uploading it with a column that just said option 2. And then inside of Revit, then when you go to place these, you can do it inside of an active command. Let's see, I think. Yeah, so I'm in option 2. I use my space programming. Again, pretend department is option, and maybe facility services is actually that option 2. I can come down and select all of these and push them into it, and that be a way to track what's in there. And the thing is that the Clarity portal, I guess, is telling you whether you're on or off. So if you delete all of the program that is associated with this option, that when you've picked one, you can still see in the dashboard and everything whether you're on or off. So it's just kind of how you use it, and that's why I wanted to show more of the real in the weeds than just a straightforward workflow, because I think we're still at a point where we're figuring out what all it can do, and it's how do you get over those little things like this. And to me, that's one way that we've done it. Or this also works with individual files. So it's not like Clarity where where it's pointing to your whole project file. Every time I open a file, I can connect to whatever project I want to. So maybe you're not using design options, maybe you just use individual files, and that's another way to do it.
And I see, Bill, on that page, you've picked the option like, hey, from a synchronization perspective, use the current phase and use the primary design option, in terms of what data gets synced back to, synced back into, to Clarity for actual reporting.
Mm-hmm. I think that's as much as I can cover on design options.
Yep. Second question was in there that I think is a good one for you, Bill, is what's the process to use it if if you create something and then in the bid process the cost comes back too high and the owner wants to redesign? Like, what's your workflow with those kinds of changes?
That's where the export to Excel is so nice, because you can just up here hit export, and it drops out your space program, and you can do your scenario modeling in this, and then you either clear the program, re-upload. It's all about understanding this requirement ID and the, let's see, of course it didn't push it out in here, but the external ID for the Revit element and which one you want to map. And if you have something in Revit, as long as this number is on the requirement ID parameter in Revit, it's going to repopulate all of this stuff. So you could delete out everything you wanted to if you're redoing layouts, and it's just really understanding this and the process between, am I adding new rooms, am I deleting these, or am I trying to update these? And how you do that is either, if you want to update it, map this column. If you want to append a new list, clear it out, re-upload. If you want to just add a whole bunch of rooms onto this, make sure there's no requirement ID when you upload, and just upload, let's say we add 10 rooms, upload a list of 10 rooms and don't map requirement ID, and it's going to just add that on the bottom of this list.
All right. And the third question out there was how much time is necessary for before you're placing the blocks necessary to set up for prep?
It's a matter of like scale of information you're tracking. If you're just doing this, which is what the typical like starting thing is, and you have a box family, you really just need probably 2 hours to set up your very first one. And then for like our end users, we actually have a couple that we've just given them admin rights on a BIM 360 project and their own Clarity project. I didn't even mention we're using this for lab planning, but they want to just like randomly append on lists of rooms to it, and they just do it on their own self-serve, and they're able to do it in 15 minutes or so, because the upload process, it is pretty easy. You can go here, project startup, and then import export, and you can upload a list. You hit browse, pick this one, or pick whatever list you have. This is this always throws me off, the red X on here, but you click next, and then it brings you into this, and it asks for what sheet in Excel are you looking at, or like here you can see it actually reads named ranges, which is pretty cool. You go into the next one, and then you just map the columns of information from Excel to the columns in your parameters that you want to track. And like for us, because we're doing all the room data sheet stuff, this is awful. But even this is something that you can get through. So it's pretty quick.
And then can you show the Revit side, since you're already sharing the Revit?
Yeah, so in Revit, you connect to your project. So connect to Clarity, pick your project. And that's what's nice is, normally Clarity reads this file as the project, but this is different in that you can just say file, new project, come here, pick which Clarity project you need to do a space program for. The parameters, you pick what category you're working on. And mass is, to me, mass is what started this. There was some stuff out there with, it's kind of started in Grasshopper with Rhino pushing boxes, and then Dynamo. There was a lot of people that picked up on that and started doing what we were doing in Grasshopper and Rhino, and they used masses. And LMN Architects actually has a great post out there and a Revit add-in that uses masses. I switched to generic models because I can automatically schedule those by level, where masses don't schedule by level. But then in here, you can click this See Recommendations, and it's going to read the Revit parameters based on the category and the space programming parameters. And it's a mapping exercise, and you say from Clarity, pick a column. In Revit, pick a parameter. Do you want the information to go from Clarity to Revit or Revit to Clarity? And do you want it to be on the start only? And so like some stuff you may want to like populate, but let the user change it. Other stuff you may want to just read like actual area and push that back up to Clarity, and just use, this is probably the longest thing of set this up, make sure that you have a level in Clarity and a level in Revit, because it tracks those for the stacking diagrams. FF&E you don't have to use to start, and you hit OK, and then you can start using Clarity.
All right. Let's see. There's a question in there for does Clarity work or integrate with Graphisoft's ArchiCAD? And the answer is no, not at this point. As Bill indicated, the API is open, so in theory, You know, if someone wanted to do a little development work, there's no reason why you couldn't pull the write something in Graphisoft that would pull the program or push things back and forth. But
Yeah, you would basically
we don't support it today.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, you're just building those 4 or 5 commands. But yeah, at the moment we only support Revit for the for the CAD side sort of automation. Let's see. Someone said they're not familiar with Clarity and what's the cost associated with it. I think I'll send out an Imagine account rep to talk to you. But generally, Clarity you can buy it either on an annual basis or on the sort of older style perpetual license kind of basis, and it's really just it's a server license primarily. So one server, and that covers all of your users and all of your projects, all for one price, either an annual subscription price or a perpetual license with smaller annual maintenance. And then the space programming module is extra. But same kind of thing.
And for what Clarity is, it's worth its weight in gold. But these tools up here are largely like Clarity can actively monitor your project, and it does a lot of automated BIM tasks. It has a bunch of computers hooked up to a database, and they're just waiting for you to tell it what to do. And so if you click like launch task, you can preset a bunch of tasks, and I can say, hey, I want to export my CAD files and print PDFs for all of the files in this project. I can click OK, and it will go and open up the files associated with this project and then export CAD files and print PDFs, because that's what I set up with this script. And you can do any sorts of scripts that you wanted to.
But it's doing all of that in the background is the sort of difference. It's not doing it right here in your foreground Revit session. It's sending it off to another machine that you designate to operate in the background so that you can keep working here. All right, well, I think we're at the end of the questions. So I think we can declare ourselves done. So thank you, Bill, for presenting and sharing what you're working on in the real world. And I'm focused on what's going on in the development lab. So